Qkey started off with the objective of how we could disrupt the entire media space. There are three things that we wanted to disrupt, or myths that we wanted to bust. The first myth is about the whole thing around the creative director in a content company. We believe that the creativity comes from talent directly, and that a creative director would possibly interfere in the creative input of talent. And so we wanted to democratize the ability for creators to reach out to their audiences without any filters of a creative director or a programming head. And so that was one thing, and we wanted to set up a network of creative people. So we believe that we built the largest network of video creators in the country today. Our network of a little over 500 million views a month consists only of creators putting out their own creativity. We believe fundamentally that the collective creativity of these people far outstrips any team of creative heads that we might employ within the company. So that was one myth, the myth about the creative director. The second one is about the whole thing around production quality determines, production investment determines the content quality. And I think people have seen now that there is very little. You can have a video that does millions of views with a very small production budget. Alternatively, you can have a video that has a ton of money invested in it with barely any views. So we wanted to debunk the myth that production investments are really not linked to production quality. The third myth that we wanted to debunk is the myth about the platform. I think in the new age media business, our preference was to be platform and destination agnostic. Typically, content companies have always set up their own destination. There is this intent to always own everything and talk about owned and operated, and this is my .com, this is my app. We think that in this new world, you've got to be pervasive everywhere, and therefore you have to shed the ego of your own destination and power the creator into all, and be platform and destination agnostic. And therefore you will see that while we work with the biggest talent across music, pranks, auto, dance, several genres, you will seldom see a Qkey logo. For us, the creator is our customer. The consumer is the creator's customer. So our whole goal has been to build a creator brand, and we leverage our relationship with the creator to reach the end consumers. Fundamentally, you'll find that people always fall in love with the creator and content. After that comes to their mind of which channel that content is actually appearing on. So we wanted to build this relationship with the creator. So we're in substance, these three myths that we wanted to bust about the platform, about the creative director, and about production investment driving everything. With all of this lies this entire agenda of saying that we wanted to democratize the creative process and therefore build a new type of a media company that is mass prototyping content and creators at a massive scale, and using analytics as the first step in place of a creative director, and as a second step comes the human interface. So that's this new kind of a media company that Qkey is building. So there is a yin and yang, or a jugalbandi of creative and business. So my background has been in venture capital, investment banking. I ran a gaming company, and then I started Qkey with Shekhar and AR and Sagar as the on day one. I'm the business guy who understands, hopefully who understands well creative people. I've been told that from several of our creators. So I like to build business models around creative processes and for creators. And I find that this left brain, right brain jugalbandi is interesting. So I find for Shekhar and Rahman are the only two people who are allowed to trump, let's say, the algorithm. Everything else is analytics based, but these two people are allowed to trump the algorithm. If they detect something, it is their collective experience that is incomparable. So they come up, we ideate on various things. The Rahman is significantly involved in some of our biggest IPs like Jamin. We constantly are doing things behind the scenes with him. Shekhar is so involved in many things at international scale. He's he's almost 70 or he's 70, but you'll find that if you follow him on Twitter or Instagram, he's always very current. He's just become a visiting faculty at MIT in Boston to talk about the future of media. So he has a very lateral view of technology, out of the box view of technology and media. So that's very helpful to sort of brainstorm ideas with him. So our after having done this now for 4 years, we built some reputation in various segments. Music, for example, a big part of what we do. We work very closely with some of the biggest stars in the space, Sanam being the largest in the music space, in the auto space, Powerdrift, Motorbeam, in the dance space, Lift Dance with Sonali, Kings United, Team Nach. So my point is, we've now started getting a lot of inbound requests of, hey, look at this channel and tell me if my content's good and what can we do, or is my song good? And we have by design not hired a creative director in the company for a reason. There are content directors, there isn't a creative director. What we tell people is, why don't you upload this content, become part of the network, we'll analyze the analytics on it, and I think we found the interesting things to be able to predict. There are some people believe that they can predict what will work. I think we come from the school that I think only God can predict what will work, because the biggest directors, the biggest creators get it wrong sometimes, and they make big mistakes getting it wrong. But what we can do fairly well is use analytics to predict a trend and to form a trend. So for example, there are various metrics that stand out. We have over 150 music creators. So we understand at a network level what are the engagement metrics, watch time completion, conversion ratios, etc., across music as a category, Bollywood versus English and we can clearly see things emerging in that. And so we use these trends. Tushar Lal is a great example of this. He came to us 2.5 years ago saying he wants to do Hans Zimmer with Indian instruments. And that seemed like a very niche idea, but he was 2,000 subscribers old, and today he's 225,000 subscribers. More importantly, he used to charge maybe 20-30,000 rupees per performance. Now it is 10 times that. And so we basically used analytics to figure that, to understand that this content that he's creating, Hans Zimmer with Indian classical instruments, actually has meat even for the Indian market. And so across the board, we've always leaned at a first level on analytics. The important thing with analytics is it can be garbage in, garbage out. You've got to know what to look for. You can't just throw analytics at a problem. It can confound you, not really give you any results. So the secret sauce in that is knowing what to look for in the analytics, because there's so much of data online that it can throw you off completely. So I think we found that, and that's why as a company we've grown step by step in each genre. We picked music as a genre. The largest genre of consumption in India is music. Globally also, I think it's music. We then built the pranks genre. We built the auto genre. We're now building the dance genre. So we attack a genre. We find interesting creators. We work very hard to find business models that don't just depend on online monetization. So we believe in 360 monetization, online and offline. We build those business models, and then the other creators sort of come inbound, and that's how we go deep into genres. So we come up with a very business mindset to create business models around each of the genres that we're attacking, and we've gone step by step. So we've been slow to grow, but I feel that our growth is a lot more robust versus just scaling and chasing views. So like I said, I think the mushrooming of OTT players, two sides to the coin. I see it as or a glass half empty or half full. I see it as a glass half full, I think. we are platform and destination agnostic, so it means that there are that many more partners that we can work with the content creators that who are our clients. So to that extent, I think it's a fantastic thing, and viewership in India has grown leaps and bounds. We think the market is upwards of 100-120 billion views a month now. So I think it's fantastic. With regards to our plans about long format content, like I said, we work with creators. If a creator comes up with an idea, we don't approach it in the way of saying we want to do this, now let's find the creator who will do this. So we've had creators, for example, one of our big automobile creators, Motobeam, apart from Motobeam as a channel, now does moto vlogging, which is basically, you know, camera mounted on his head and just driving and talking about his life or cars. And that channel is growing, you know, faster than the channel that is 4 years old, with 350,000 subscribers or somewhere around that. So that format is 30 minutes, 20 minutes. So it is longer format content. We've done a couple of web series. So it's really driven by what the creators want to do and how do we build our business model around that. So we have no aversion, but neither do we have any specific strategy just for long format content. We like to believe that firstly, what is very evident is when the market was chasing views as a metric, we always felt views were like the gross merchandise value in an e-commerce company. It was a metric that you could boast about and people might buy into it. But if you looked one level deeper, there could be many nuances to just that number. You know, were they purchased, what kind of content. So you could get a lot of views from putting slightly edgy content that doesn't really monetize. A lot of film catalog, a lot of you know, already created content, put that back on a digital. And I think those models become about CPM arbitrage. Any player in this space will tell you that the monetization rates have crashed. It's a good problem to have. The monetization rates have crashed because viewership has gone up so much, supply has gone up so much that the ad rates have got demonetized or devalued and the fill rates have declined. So I think it's a temporary phase. It's a problem, but it's a good problem to have. Now, if we were just a network about views and our dependency was about our network scale and strength, we'd be in serious trouble. Instead, we've actually had very robust growth on a monetization revenue front online as well as views. And our 360 model has kicked in nicely. So we have three divisions. We have the video network, we have the brands division, the IPs division, and we have a offline division that basically monetizes. So we look at online popularity as a digital TRP, and this digital TRP can be monetized with brands, in creating IPs with brands, in doing commission content for brands, and it can be monetized offline. So for the Tushar Lal example I gave, Sanam's rates have also 10x'd in their offline performances over the period that they've grown from 100,000 to 3+ million subscribers on YouTube. So I think having a 360-degree perspective to this market versus saying that we just have you know, we're about only building the video network is super important. And having this creator mindset, I mean, I think everybody likes to believe that they have a creator mindset, but if you are hell-bent on slapping your logo onto everything that you're creating, it's not quite the creator mindset. We get a lot of flack from our shareholders and sometimes from even the team members to, you know, why aren't we putting our logo on this? We produced it. And I think I don't believe it buys us any brownie points or loyalty with the end consumer. The consumer sees something they like Sanam, they like Powerdrift, they like Motobeam, they like Sonali. They don't really care about the Qiki logo sitting on it, so why should I put it? And by not putting it, I think we earn a lot of goodwill with our creator partners. And so some of these things, in the way we approach creators and the way we work with creators, and the way we contract with them, the kind of deals that we do with them, I think those are all quite different. And that's why we've been able to sort of sustain and grow, and we hope that we can keep reinventing that relationship that we have with creators. I think the internet and TV are the best friends, and people are making them enemies by saying that one will kill the other. You know, back in the late 90s, everybody said the newspapers will die in the next decade. It didn't happen. And newspapers have reinvented themselves. Now everybody's talking about how the Wall Street Journal has actually got people to start paying for access to the Wall Street Journal online. I think the partnership between how TV works, I think TV will continue to have amazing reach, and digital is designed for engagement. And as a brand, you would want both. If you want to target only youth and you're looking at more engagement, I think digital is probably, you should be overweight on digital versus TV. So I certainly don't think TV is going to die anytime soon. I also think TV, your screen eventually will merge into, you will watch a YouTube channel on TV. I mean, soon I think you'll have the option, as you're switching channels between Star Plus and Colors, there will be your Sanam channel in between, or your Shraddha channel in between, of music or whatever it is. So it will become as easy. Today you have to go through 3 steps to access YouTube on your smart TV. That will go away and will probably get integrated directly. So at that point in time, the TV, I mean, you already have TV with web functionality, right? So that will merge into this internet. So the internet content with broadband available will, HD content, etc., will just be available on your TV set. So I think the two will eventually begin to mesh much more closely into one kind of a experience on the device. And I see them really as very strong cousins and not competition. Censorship, yes. Third party censorship, no. Self censorship, yes. So I think the web, the collective community decides that if it goes over the top, you'll always have some people who are putting something that is too harsh. You know, how have people regulated this? Every time something is, we've been subject to things that happen on, for example, on YouTube community guidelines. Simple things like a blogger talking about where you can get a fake iPhone, just covering the Bombay market on where people are buying fake iPhones, shut down a channel that was a few 100,000 subscribers because it got a community strike. So I think the community strike piece for racy content, you know, anything that is over the top, I think the community does tend to speak up, and you will have issues like this. But if somebody is crossing the line, I think the platforms tend to self-regulate. The OTTs will automatically have to regulate, because I think at some point they are also attracting advertisers, and if they cross the line on some of these parameters, advertisers would begin to have issues with that. So I think self-regulation or self-censorship is probably the way ahead, and it doesn't bother me that somebody has created something that has crossed the line. I think it will balance itself out. I think to add 4 more genres, we know which 4 genres we are going after in the overall repertoire. Like I said, we do them somewhat sequentially so that we can actually build deep business models around each genre. And we are also looking to enhance our O2O, or our online to offline capabilities, to make our overall business model a lot more 360 as a media company, or a new format of a media company, versus sort of being overly dependent just on digital. So on these 2 fronts, adding more genres to our entire repertoire, and having a lot more O2O in our overall business model. Well, I'm a huge auto enthusiast. You'll see these motorcycles behind me. Till very recently, it used to be my Sunday morning thing to go riding to the Gujarat border to have breakfast at a Parsi joint. So that used to be my yoga. I have stopped doing that of late, but I look forward to riding on the track, and I still do drives. So usually in Sunday mornings, I don't play golf, but I go driving with my biker friends. So that's my tune out. On and off. I like cool stuff. I think Dan Brown is really cool. So one of his books that I'd missed was Symbol. I like to read a lot of, I enjoy reading management books. So there's always something or the other that is on the anvil with regard to management, and it helps me, or motivational stuff. Stuff that I enjoy stuff either in the segment, like I said, of fiction that is based on some fact, like Dan Brown, and stuff that I can apply in my sort of day-to-day life and work environment. I enjoy those two categories. I think believe in the onset of a digital superstar. I've been evangelizing this. I mean, consistently, if you know, whenever I'm out speaking at any forum or a panel, I keep evangelizing the emergence of a digital superstar. They are no longer micro celebrities. I think digital superstars are 17 times more engaging. They have multiples greater brand recall than traditional media stars in the online arena. And I think the emergence of digital superstars is a fantastic thing that is happening, and we're experiencing that. And eventually that will lead to the shift from the AdX currently being 45-47% towards TV to a lot more AdX shifting towards digital advertising. Hi, this is Samir Bangara, and I'm the co-founder and managing director of QK Digital Media. Catch me on Indian Wikimedia.